Hey, what's up there, YouTube? Wrecker Man Dan coming to you again with another trick install video. Today we're going to install this DewEze clutch pump. This is a belt-driven hydraulic clutch pump. We're going to be putting it on this Dodge right here. This is going to power all the hydraulics on our Wrecker tow truck bed. I'll show you everything that comes in the kit when we pull this out. First thing, we're going to have to prep some things here before we even get to start installing. We're gonna have to pull this little electrical plug up out of here, move it up here, tuck it out of the way. Our pump's gonna go in here. The hoses are gonna run back under this intake manifold. So we're gonna have to move this harness up out of the way a little bit. We have a bracket that comes in the kit with a new idler pulley wheel that's gonna bolt on right here. So we have a longer belt that comes in the kit as well. We're going to remove this OEM belt and install a longer belt. In order to do that, we have to remove the radiator fan bracket here that holds the wiring harness to it, so we can remove the old belt and install the new belt. In order to get in here too, what I also do is I remove this nut on these support rods here. There's one on either side that just holds the fan shroud in place. I'm going to be removing these nuts here so that we can kind of pull this whole fan shroud back out of our way to make it easier to get in there. As you can see, it's pretty tight. So we're also going to be removing this radiator hose bracket assembly right here, because the bracket comes in the kit for our pump is going to bolt on the top of the motor here. It comes with a new bracket to hold this, so we're going to be assembling that on top of our bracket. It'll replace this black half of the bracket. So we'll just disconnect it right here at this 10mm bolt. We'll leave this assembly on the hose, and this will bolt to the new bracket that goes on top of the bracket that holds our whole clutch pump assembly. We have wiring harness coming out of here. This is for all our inside. These are our auxiliary switches here on top. 1, 2, 3, 4. This is for our PTO, but we're doing a clutch pump on this one, so we'll use some of these functions. This is on a PTO, transmission mounted PTO. This is our pressure signal return, and this is just our hot from the factory PTO switch. So we're going to run this to our clutch pump to power the clutch pump from the factory PTO switch, and then we have coupled them together ahead of time because all we want this to do is send the hot from our switch back into the cab. Just check out the link in the description on wiring the VSIM, and that will cover all this more in depth. Let's get all these parts, some of these parts off here, get it all prepped, and then we'll get all the parts out of the box, and I'll come back to you on the next step. Okay, this is everything that comes in the kit. So we got a pump. This is going to bolt into this bracket. So essentially this bracket's going to sit on this pump just like this. This is the clutch right here. So it's a magnet. So our belt's going to ride on this. This sits on this magnet here. And this is the wire right here that we'll supply power to activate the magnet, which will activate this clutch then. And this then will, instead of free spinning on here, it'll lock it up, so the belt will actually turn the whole assembly, which then right here you can see there's a keyway right here that goes on the shaft here of the pump. So that will then in turn drive the pump. So then we'll have to put our fittings in here, suction, pressure. This is the idler wheel that it comes with that will relocate on a new bracket. See, it comes with these bags here. We got have all our fittings in it. We have our suction fitting, we have our pressure fitting, hardware to hold our bracket together. This is the new bracket for our radiator hose. Like I showed you, this is the bracket right here that our new idler wheel will go on. So this will bolt to our motor. This is where the wheel will go on. This is the new longer belt that it comes with. So let me get into assembling all this. I'm going to assemble the bracket. I'm going to put the fittings on the pump because the suction fitting you cannot get on the pump after you've put this bracket on. So I'm going to put the fittings in my pump, I'm going to put this bracket on the pump, and then I will actually put this bracket for the clutch, assembles like this, onto this bracket. So then we'll assemble all this, and we will we'll put our hoses on the fittings, and we'll have the whole assembly, and then we'll just slide the whole assembly right up into the front of the truck. Because it's going to be a pain to get our hose clamps on our hoses on the fittings with this already installed in there. There's not really any room to work on, so you have to kind of pre-assemble this whole assembly and then put the whole thing up in there. So let me get to it, and I'll get back to you guys. There are some things I do differently than they have here in the instructions. They're step by step. I do steps in a slightly different order, a little bit differently, because after doing literally probably 1,000 of these, I've found a simpler way. And then they give you all these stickers too. You got a notice sticker to put up under the hood. So all these we put up under the hood. Your belt routing for the new belt that compensates for your pump, and the new idler wheel that I showed you. And then all the information from our paperwork here that goes to the customer for warranty information. We also put on this tag that goes up under the hood, and then they give you this clear laminate that's a sticker to put over this to protect it. And so we'll put this down, sticker, and then they give you a little nice DewEze sticker. So we put all this up under the hood, so if anybody else services this truck, they can refer to this for their belt routing. They see the notice that this has an aftermarket clutch pump kit on it. So we'll put all this up under the hood right now too. I like to do all this, get this out of my way before I even get onto the install. So we have our pump assembly, everything's put together, ready to go. We referenced some of our kit numbers, serial numbers, part numbers off of the Parker tag that's on the pump. So we had that as well if it wasn't written on the box to fill out our paperwork for it. So let's get to the install. Okay guys, so we got all our hoses on here now. As you can see, I've clocked these fittings in a specific angle. This one I always do almost at a 45 down that way. So this will be the top of the pump here. This is where it's going to bolt to the motor. So this is the top right here. So I clocked this one down at a little bit of a 45. This one I have coming straight out the back, and I'll show you why. And I tighten them in that position too, and I'll show you why. So the smaller hose, the pressure fitting and line, will be coming off the pump. The lighting's really bad. Here we go. Let me see. So yeah, so the pressure fitting and the pressure hose will be back under here a little bit, like where I showed you, under this wiring harness. It'll run back under there. So we don't want it to go down at all because it'll run into this, and we don't want it to go up at all because it's going to be tucked back under that. So it's got to come straight out. And then the suction hose, the big hose, we clock down at a 45 because it's going to come off the pump on this side and we need it to clear this intake. So if it comes straight out like the pressure, it'll run right into this. If it goes straight down, it'll just run into our steering down there. So we want to have it come slightly down, and then the hose will bend a little bit to loop under this a little bit, and then it'll come underneath all this straight out the back. It'll go down through here, through there, down to the side of our frame. And then we'll drill and tap the side of our frame, run some brackets that will bolt some hose clamps too to hold it down in there. I'll show you all that later. So there's the idler pulley wheel there and the bracket that it's on. We got that mounted up. We got the bracket off of here that was holding this hose clamp right here for a radiator hose. So we got that off of there because we have a new one that's going to replace that. It's going to go on top of the bracket that holds our pump. We pulled this little plug up out of the way here and just kind of set it on top of the harness. It's usually taped down in here, so we just kind of rip the tape, pull it up, set it up on here so it's out of our way for now. We took the nuts off of these radiator fan shroud supports off so we can move this out of our way. As you can see, it's really tight to get in there. As you can see too, it's quite a pain to get your breaker bar down in there to the belt tensioner. So we got the belt pretty much all the way off, as you saw, and then I just cut the belt because we're not going to use the old belt. We don't need it anymore, so I just cut it to make it easier to remove, and just throw it away. And we need to remove this top 13mm bolt right here that holds the radiator fan shroud support rod right here that we removed the nut on so we can move the shroud. We need to remove this top bolt right here. And be careful you keep it in place because this is going to pivot on the bottom bolt as soon as you take this top bolt out. So this will move a little bit. It'll help you. You can move this a little bit as you're trying to put the bracket in here to line up this back hole that the bolt threads into. They supply us with a new bolt for this, a little bit longer, because we have a tab on the bottom of our bracket that's going to also bolt to this location to hold it in place. Let me show you that. So here's our assembly right here. So you can see, let me hold it up, that tab right there. So on the bottom of the assembly, that tab right there will bolt into that location. So we're going to pull that bolt out right now too, and then we can get to it. so we got the pump in, whole assembly's in, as you can see. That's why we clock these fittings like that. See, the hose is just barely going under there. Same with this one. See, it's tucked way back in there. Here, let me get a flashlight real quick so you can see it a little better. There we go. Okay, so yeah, see, you can see this fitting coming off the pump back in there. See? So it barely fits in there. So that's why we tuck this up out of the way. Clock this fitting like that. So it's all in there. Now we need to put our belt on. So we have the little plug for the radiator fan right here, the wiring. The bracket actually, let's see if you can see it right here, this little tab right here with the hole in it. Oh, where is it? Right here. This little tab right here with the hole in it. It's got a little pop rivet on the bracket and it's got a plug on it. So we'll pop the pop rivet into the hole on that tab, and then this is the plug right here that goes to it. It hangs right here. So we'll reconnect that, and then we need to take this wire and we'll connect it to our wires coming out of here. This is our PTO switch in the cab, as I showed you previously. So then we'll splice a section of wire from here. We'll just zip tie it along these battery cables so it looks factory. We'll loom it all when we're done. We'll bring it up to this one. We'll run it down here, zip tie it all, and have it connect to here. We'll put a little butt connector that clips on to this bullet connector here. So if we ever need to service this pump, pull it out, we can just unplug it. But it'll all be covered and hidden by the loom too. And I like to zip tie this back to this harness, keeping tension on it, because if you keep the tension through this bracket, then it'll keep the wire away from your pulley there. See the wire going through the hole in the bracket there? So if you keep tension on it, it'll keep it away from rubbing on the side of this and arcing out or getting chewed through or damaged. So I like to do that. Sometimes some people will put like some airline or heat shrink or something else on here. You can do that if you want. I've never experienced a problem with this, so I feel like it's a little overkill to do that. If you feel so compelled though, not a problem, wouldn't hurt. So let me install the belt and I'll get back to you. Alright, so we got the belt put on finally. Make sure we go check every single pulley, make sure it's on correctly, not hanging off the edge of any of them, even our little smooth idlers like that. We got all the stickers up here so we can refer to our belt routing while we're putting the belt on. We wired up the clutch pump, loomed it, ran that to our switch there, as you can see. So we finished that. Belt's all on here. Everything looks good. We're ready to go. You can see we put the little pop rivet back in there for the wiring harness for the fan. Reattached that. And let's go look at the bottom now. I'll show you underneath. There's a few things to be careful of under here too. So when you're routing the belt here, it loves to get up on these teeth, so you want to make sure it's not on that it's centered. There we go. Sorry, waiting for it to focus. You want to make sure it's centered on here and not riding on any of these teeth. And then there is also a sensor right here. This little black nub right there. So you have to slip the belt underneath there, in between there. So sometimes the belt will get wedged between this side right here and the side of that little black nubbin right there. You can see it, the little sensor. So you'll have to slip it under that. Make sure that it's not riding on that. You don't want any of those problems before you start this truck and the belt goes through here. It will shred your belt or throw it. So I want to make sure that, yeah, we get under here to check these pulleys on the bottom too, so the belt is centered. You don't want one of the ribs of the belt to be catching on this lip and the belt hanging off to one side. I've seen it happen, and it'll slice the whole side off of your belt. It'll cut down the width of your belt. So yeah, so we're good. We look good on everything. So we're ready to rock. So let me show you the hose routing here. So I showed you previously how we clock the fittings and why. You want to make sure that I put the hose clamps here so you can get to these with a wrench. You don't see, I can have a finger's gap in here. This is a little rubber boot on our intake. You don't want these resting against this. It'll chew a hole through that. So you can see our pressure is back there too. You can see the blue stripe on it and the writing on the hose. You can see just the end of the fitting there. There we go. So that's routed back through there. The suction is going down. So let me show you up over here where they're going to go down through the engine compartment down to the frame. So there you can see the big, suction hose here. You can see the pressure hose there. So let me get down under the truck and I'll show you how we're going to route them along the frame too and how we tie them up. So here we are underneath the truck. We have the hoses coming off of our clutch pump down here along the side of the frame here underneath. We're going to put them above this cross member. Now, I've been specifically told by Dodge, do not zip tie to any of these fuel lines under here. They claim that the zip ties will eventually chafe and chew through these hard lines. There's rubber coating on some of them. You're allowed to loosely zip tie onto that, but to avoid any warranty issues and all of that, we drill some holes in the frame here and tap them so we can bolt right into the material of the frame, and we'll put a long bracket on here that has holes at the end that we can bolt hose clamps to that'll hold these up. We also don't want these hoses hanging on these hoses here and putting pressure on those lines. So we'll make the bracket with the hose clamps push these up a little bit. And we also don't want them resting on these hoses, but we also don't want it smashed up against the floorboard here, because any fluid transferring through this while the pump is running will vibrate the floor and it'll echo like crazy inside the cab. So to cut down on noise inside the cab, we try to isolate that from touching the body at all. So we'll install a bracket here with hose clamps to the hoses right in this area. We'll install another clamp here. Get back a little bit so you can see another clamp here that'll come straight out. This one will be bent at like a 45 to go up to the hoses in there. And then we'll zip tie the hoses together. We'll zip tie them to some of the harness that's in here. We'll come back over here past the cross member towards the back of the truck. And as you can see, there are actually nut certs welded into the frame right here. Now on this one back here, we will just run a hose clamp straight to this, no bracket, and we'll tie the hoses together. We'll hose clamp the one big hose and we'll zip tie with big zip ties just the other hose to it to keep it under this frame as tight as we can, because if we run a bracket out from this, it'll put the hoses, let me show you,
it'll put the hoses, here's our hole to mount to. It'll put the hoses out here, right where our DEF spout is here, to bleed our DEF and change the filter. And we don't want to be in the way of this. We don't want to make it complicated for them to service the truck. So we'll keep the hoses back over here, not out here directly under it or against it or anything. We'll keep it over here. And then we will install the bed and everything, and we will eventually route the hoses up through here in between the fuel tank and up to our hydraulic tank that's going to be on the bed that we install. Right now this is just a chassis with nothing on it. Alright guys, so I went ahead and did a little extra for you. Went ahead and showed you the hose routing here coming out of the back of the clutch pump. So we're underneath the truck right now, and you can see this is the main things to worry about. Is, see, we have our steering shaft up here with a little boot on it here, kind of looking like a shock boot. See, and then there's a bolt right up there where the steering shaft is bolted together. When the steering shaft turns, when the vehicle is turning or steering, this bolt is going to spin around on here, so you don't want it close to any of these hoses or any of the factory hoses or wiring, because it's just gonna chew through that. So you want to make sure to keep it away from that. So we installed these brackets, as you've seen, to keep the hoses up out of there. So we don't want the hoses resting on our starter up here. They're just barely touching it, not really resting on it. We can bend it up out of the way a little bit more. I'll probably tweak on it a little bit more. We don't want it hanging on these hoses either. It's not, I got almost a finger's gap in between there. So we're well away from that. So we're good. If you feel so compelled to reach up in there and zip tie some other wires of yours, or maybe zip tie these, I believe they're power steering lines, to your hose to keep them even further out of the way, and you're welcome to do that. I don't think it's really necessary on this truck. It looks like we have plenty of room. I have seen it be an issue before, so that's just something to be leery of. So that's why we use this really long bracket here and bolt it up there, and then we bring the hoses back down. We create another mounting spot here. So these are all drilled and tapped into the frame, as you've seen me threading the frame here with a little tapper. So then I mount a bracket here, got these hoses like that. We go over this cross member, and I use big zip ties on this. So in some spots, like I did a hose clamp for both hoses here. Up here, I don't really have the room for it, so I just use a big zip tie the pressure line to the suction. And then we do that again in a few spots, like here. I just used one zip tie to zip tie them both together to the factory harness to just keep it as close to the frame rail as we can. So let me scoot back here a little bit and show you. So then we zip tied them again here and here to the wiring harness as well, to keep them up over here to the side. And then right here we have some threaded inserts in the frame. Let's see, right here. So these are factory. These are supplied from Dodge right here. It's already threaded, standard thread. So we just utilize one of those. I believe there's 3 right here. Yeah, there's 3 in a row right here by the little DEF filter. So instead of using a bracket on that, the bracket would actually push our hoses out from the frame, and it'd be below changing our filter and bleeding it here. So we keep them out of the way of that too, so it's serviceable without having to move any of this. So that's pretty much our routing right there, guys, as you can see. Just follow the hoses there. So, and then back here where they start to go up and inside the frame next to our fuel tank here, I actually install another bracket here, as you can see, that holds the hoses here too as they start to run up. And we might come back to this and add a hose clamp for the smaller one. We might just zip tie it here. It all depends on what bed we're getting on this truck and where our hydraulic fitting is on the hydraulic tank on our bed. Some of them are the tank on the side of the bed outside the frame rail. This one is going to be centered right directly underneath the bed itself, right by this cross member, but on the other side of it. So that's why we run these through here past the cross member, and it's going to be a pretty tight bend up to the fitting that's going to be on our tank. So I'll show you all that in another video. This is just wrapping up our clutch pump install. I just want to do a little extra, show you guys the belt routing, kind of give you a heads up on that. But if you want to check out the bed install and the finished truck, I'll come back and put a new link. I'll update a link in the description of this video once we install the bed, and you guys can see that.